welcome back to ASEC. I'm Pastor Natasha.
I'm Elder Kristie.
Hey, if you've been joining us for the month of October, I hope that you feel like you're growing and flourishing this month. It's such a daily commitment to walk with the Lord. We have to die daily. We have to make an intentional choice to feed our hearts. Sometimes, I think we were talking about technology, and we have such a habit of picking up the phone, jumping on technology, and feeding our spirit with technology. And of course, there are many good things that you can feed yourself with, like ASEC, jumping in on the Raise Encounters YouTube page. Apostle has amazing work and ministry online as well. And so, obviously, it's all about being intentional in terms of how we feed our hearts. And so all month long, if you're just tuning in, we've been talking about, nurturing the ground of our heart, or nurturing our garden, which is our heart, tending to the garden. And so, all month long we've been talking about, is your garden flourishing? If the master gardener, the Father God, were to walk past your garden, is it overgrown with weeds? Is it untended? Or is, when the Father God, the gardener, when he walks past your garden, is it well manicured? You use that word. Is it manicured? Is it almost ripe for harvest? Right. And so all month long we're being intentional about sowing and really spending the time to nurture the garden of our hearts. And so this week we're going to be talking about really what should be growing in our garden, right?
And your spiritual
in our spiritual garden, and really we want to be like Jesus.
Exactly.
We want to mirror. Who he was. Jesus was the perfect example.
Exactly.
He was God in the flesh. He walked a sinless life and gave us a perfect example. Of and then he went on to say greater works. What we do. And so we are all because we are fashioned after God, after Christ. We all have the capacity to grow and evolve and to walk a life that's honorable. And so tending to our garden and making sure that we're growing the right things in our garden. It's really, really cool. So we think about a produce, like next year I'm going to have a garden. Okay. And I need to get a game plan, because what I understand is when you're a new gardener, that, this would be, in fact, we might even start a garden club. I really, if I can find the time, I have a wonderful client who, she's a gardener, and every produce that you could think of, she has it around her home. And what I love about the way she's done her garden is, she didn't carve out a plot of ground and put everything in a square, and that she literally incorporated her garden into her landscaping. So when you pull up to her home, and she's in a suburb, when you pull up to the home, you see all this beautiful the flowers. So you see all the flowers, foliage. But then if you really, get closer to what she's done, then you'll see some lettuce growing up, or you'll see some thyme and some sage, or, along her garage, she'll have blackberries and blueberries growing. And then, it's just so really cool how she's done it. And even so much so, she has the bees trained to swarm around her house and pollinate. So they, because they look for certain plants. And so she's like, yes, and my bees know kind of how to, circle around my house so that they pollinate all of my produce and flowers. So she's really, really good. And so she was talking about starting a gardening club, and, that would be fun. But one of the things that she said is, we need to start the garden club in the fall, so that you can get everything mapped out. So then by, spring, you're putting things in the ground, and you've kind of studied location, which you talked about week 1, and, where you want your garden to be, and so on and so forth. But, part of, a garden is okay, well, what do I want to grow in my garden? Do I want sage? Do I want rosemary? Do I want, basil? Do I want, carrots? Do I want, lettuce, romaine, and all these different things. So, so talking about, what do we want to grow in our garden? I love that, that, when we were talking about this, we were talking about, we want to look like Jesus. We want to have the attributes of Jesus. We want to have the fruit of the Spirit growing in our garden.
Yes.
And so let's talk this week about, what fruit we should have growing in our garden and how to cultivate that.
Well, I think really, truthfully, the main thing is love. You know, because love is patient, love is kind. It like I took the scripture, 1 Corinthians 13. It's love is patient, love is kind, not envious or boastful, not rude or self-seeking.
Yeah.
So, but then my mind went right back to, but God loved us so much that he gave.
Yeah, he gave.
He gave.
Yeah.
And giving could be anything. Giving is your time. Giving is your finances.
Yeah.
Giving is, if somebody needs something, you fulfill that need.
Yeah.
I mean, we can give in anything. If you see, there's this one guy that came, the first time I don't want to say it scared me, but it kind of took me off guard. But there was Dave was alive at that time, and I heard this knock at the door, and I went to the front door, and here this guy, you could tell he was really, in bad shape. His teeth wouldn't fit right, and he said, "Can I rake your leaves?" or something to that effect. And I said, "No." I said, "I have my son doing that." And I said, he said, "I'm hungry." And I said, "Well, just sit down," because we have 2 chairs on our porch and a little table. I said, "Sit down." And I said, "I'll fix you something." And so I went in there, and I fixed him like a shredded turkey sandwich, and gave him a banana and a bottle of water, and before I knew it, I mean, I looked and he was gone.
Oh, wow.
And I remember Pastor Sherry and I talking about it, and she said, "You did lock your door, you did." And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I've probably done the same thing." It's just that you can't. It's one of those things. Well, that's your problem. You can't do that. Because we're known for what we do. We're known for our actions. And are we doing what Christ did? He fed the multitudes when he was preaching to them. So it's and then God gave him to us so we could be redeemed. So that love is so important.
Giving.
And it's not just emotional. Just like our heart, it's deep. We love because he loved us. And he placed that in us. So it's like I don't know, what's love. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, love. The word tells us that love is the principal thing. Wisdom is the principal thing, but love. He loved us first, right? Which is why we're able to love. Right, and there's so many wonderful scriptures around love, but I believe that it really is the foundational piece of who he is.
It is.
Is love. And there's all types of love. There's agape love. There's all types of love that we could go into in terms of phileo and just different types of love. But that pure love gives. And being able to really look at our lives and say, am I growing the fruit of love in my garden?
Right.
Is there any areas of my life where I'm holding back and not giving?
Right.
Giving of my time, my finances, that's just in general, because love forgives, it's kind, it's all of these things. We'll go into like all the different fruits of the Spirit, but but they all go back to love.
Exactly.
You know, and how can I love in a greater capacity? How can I love my neighbors? How can I love strangers?
Right.
You know, which is what your story, you're talking about someone that was a stranger and you fed them. You know, how can I, you know, love my children, my spouse, you know, and in a greater way, you know? And so I love that because it's intentional. It's, you know, maybe it's sitting down and picking, you know, hey, I want to, you know, focus on, you know, love in, you know, and maybe I'm thinking about my children. How can I love them, you know, better this month?
Right.
You know, how can I love my spouse greater this month? You know, how can I pour the fruit of love into my ministry?
Right.
You know, the church that I serve. You know, the people that I work with.
Right.
You know, the people that, what Pastor Sherry say, walking along the street, the people that you meet when you're walking along the street, you know, and being intentional about that, because certainly Jesus was, when he walked the earth, he was intentional about displaying love.
Well, you know, too, it's like, because again, the times and seasons that we're in, you know, we have to be able to love the unlovable.
Yeah.
I mean, Christ did that. We have to love the unlovable because we don't know the backstory to that.
Yeah.
All we have to do is love them.
Yeah.
You know, and if that means feeding them, if that means, you know, buying them, or even, you know, like I remember when Pastor Sherry said she used to keep things in her car and then would roll down the window, you know, and hand them stuff, you know, whether it was socks or gloves or, you know, maybe some cracker, you know, it was just little things. But, you know, you don't know what little things really meant. You know, it's just, you don't know, as far as poverty, what some of the people, when was their last meal? You know, I mean, I know that there's a lot of agencies out now that do have like food and stuff like that, you know. I remember we used to go to the veterans, you know, wherever you got food. But Dave would go, I would take him, but he would go because he liked to talk to them. You know, I mean, he would sit there and just talk, you know, and then, and so because they had something in common and you didn't know what they had been through, but they had that common thing, that common thread in their lives. And I think too, it made him feel like important. And I'm sure it made the other person feel that way too. Hey, I was worth him even, you know, because you don't know what war does. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I mean, love can be so many different things. Fulfilling needs.
So I love that, being intentional.
Yeah, I do too.
About am I, you know, displaying love? And I think that sometimes that we can get so busy in myopic in our own world, in our own lives, in our own responsibilities, that we can easily forget that I need to be cultivating love, and love is typically on display in some way, right? It's giving and it's on display, you know. And so, you know, I want to encourage you all that are listening to, you know, cultivate that into your garden if you feel like you've not been loving, or maybe it's more natural. Sometimes it's more natural to be more selfish in some areas of our lives, right? And it's like, okay, identifying, okay, maybe I'm being selfish in this area, and I need to develop more.
And, you know, too, some people can't give, you know, like, I mean, it's like the widow's mite, you know, I mean, but to God, that was more than what the biggest, you know, like whatever, he was rich and he didn't give near as much. He did maybe in calculation, but not in what it really was to them.
Because some people are maybe naturally giving, or maybe they're naturally giving, or maybe they're just intentionally cultivating a spirit of giving, right? But like you said, that some people, or even if we're not careful, we can find that we're pulling back on our giving and pulling back on our time. And so because of that, or maybe just naturally not a giver, maybe more selfish in some ways. And so because of that, you know, it's like, man, I need to learn how to give, because love is giving.
Love is giving.
Love is giving.
Yeah.
You know,
He really, you know, in different times, I remember, being in Toledo, and we had a church was going to be, it was an old theater, but it was going to be opening up as a church, and it was when we hadn't bought a house yet, we was living in like a condo type thing, but still it was like, it was really, laid upon our hearts, if we were going to be there and we were going to be prayer warriors and, on all that, then we had to give there, so that year we actually we tied double, to both churches, but still God turned that around, and we got our house for unbelievable amount up there. And it's like, you can't outgive God.
You cannot outgive God.
And God can't, and money can't be so high. You can't place money higher than God. You can't. It's not an idol. It's paper. I mean, really, it is. And if it burned up, you wouldn't have it. You know what I mean? Because there's nothing to even track it. So it's nothing. But you can't. And we weren't really doing that for that reason. It just kind of fell in place.
Because you can't outgive God.
You can't outgive God.
And He's not a man that he should lie. Whatsoever a man sows, that he shall reap. And so part of sowing, love, is that there's a reaping of that, of sowing that, and so I love, that's one of the things that we should be focusing on, is sowing and growing love, in the garden of our heart. I totally agree. Along with that, Elder Kristie, we can talk about, and I know that you have that here, is forgiveness is another fruit that we should be growing in our garden, which for just the word itself tells you that beforehand you're willing to give, right? Or forgive, to forgiveness. So beforehand, before the offense, you're willing to forgive or to give, which is forgiveness is rooted in your capacity to love, right? Because love is all about love. If you're growing the fruit of love, it helps you to forgive. You'll be able to forgive because you understand love, right? What do you think about forgiveness?
Well, too, it's like, if you can't forgive, you can't be forgiven.
I
mean, really, so it's like, you have to have a forgiving heart, because you don't know how many people you might have offended. Maybe not intentionally, maybe not nothing, but still, it's one of those things. It's like, you have to forgive. And, sometimes, it's, I'm sure you've come across this, you haven't really realized that you are holding something, like an unforgiveness thing. You don't realize that at all. And then pretty soon you might see a person, and all of a sudden it's like, and you have this, and it's like, oh man, and you have to get it out. Because it hides. It hides. And so we have to make sure, cleanse my heart. Purify my heart, oh God.
Looking at the ground of our heart,
right?
Surveying the garden, and finding out, is there any unforgiveness, that has settled up? Because we know, we'll talk about it next week, we know that if it settles there for too long, it's going to create a weed, that will suck the life out of the garden, right? So yes, growing the fruit of forgiveness in our garden, so that when the offense comes, and it will, because the offenses come, when it comes, that we're willing to forgive.
Yes.
I think that's really good,
really important.
You talked about humility, growing humility, and the opposite of humility is pride. So growing humility in your garden, you want to talk about that?
I think we have to be humble. Humility really is humbleness. We have to realize that we only are who we are because of God.
I love that.
And so we have to be very humble. If we have, like you say, we get into the pride. If we get it, then we're not good for nothing. We always have to keep our hearts and our minds open. That all these other things play into it. That's where the forgiveness oh God, we're asking forgiveness because, we are nothing without him.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing. And when we really realize that, then it's not hard to be humble. And
that's good.
Yeah, I think it's just, you don't see much humility. You really don't. But I see it sometimes in worship, how as they're singing, they will kind of bow down, and it's because that what they're singing is coming from their heart, and they're humbling themselves over that praise to God, because the praise is more important. They're humbling themselves. It's like, and we should always, we're never, it's like, we can't think we're better than anybody because we're not.
We're not.
We have the same insides. We have the same, heart. It's what we do with it, and how we react to correction. What do we do with correction? Are we humble about it? And, and if we're not, then, it just grows.
I think these are things that have to be the fruits of the Spirit, or these attributes of Jesus, or these fruits that we're growing in our garden. I think they have to be revisited often. Pastor Sherry always says, for leaders, you always have to cast the vision every 3 weeks or every 21 days, because, part of the human psychology, if you will, we forget things. We lose sight of the vision.
Right.
And I have found that the fruit of the Spirit, or these attributes of Jesus that should be growing in the garden of our heart, they have to be revisited often. I remember, and I want to start to do this again, because I had actually lost sight of this again. If after 3 weeks, if you're not revisiting the why behind the what or the vision.
Right.
But what I would do is, I used to, in my meditation and prayer time, I would focus on a fruit of the Spirit every day. So I would say, okay, today I'm going to focus on love. And then I would find scriptures around love. And then just through intentionality, try to really work on, in every scenario or situation, that an encounter that I would have throughout the day, I would, analyze and ponder, and be intentional about, am I walking in love? And, because that was my word for the day, or my fruit for the day. And then the next day, then I might choose, peace, or I was just going through this, and I would choose one each day and kind of focus, right? And then I would start that after I got through all 9 of the fruit of the Spirit. I would start that over. And so that was just something that I would do. But I hadn't done it in a while. I did it for a while and really saw the benefit of doing that. But having this conversation is reminding me that, if we're not revisiting these fruits, then we kind of lose sight, and then, we're believers, we love Christ, but we're not displaying any fruit.
Because that's what people see.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're a Christian?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. But see, the fruit is what they see.
If the fruit is exactly.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And that's why you said you haven't visited, but you were watering that every day.
Watering, intentionally. And I think that's what this whole month is about, like being intentional about the garden of your heart.
Right.
And so, yes, during that season, I was being very intentional about gardening the heart.
Exactly.
And then I just kind of got away from that. But I do think the fruit of the Spirit, these attributes, these fruits, are something that, you do have to be intentional about cultivating, is the word. Cultivating them, because otherwise you'll lose sight, and before you know it, you might be walking in love, but then you're not walking in humility.
Right.
Or you're walking, you might be thinking you're walking in humility, but you're not walking in self-control.
Right.
And all kinds of things that, we're just it's part of the responsibility we have is to like we said, be intentional about working in our garden, and keeping it manicured.
That's, I don't say hard, but sometimes you don't see yourself as other people see you.
Yes. Oh,
and
gosh.
and it's one of those things. It's like, intention is right. I mean, you have to be so intentional as far as, going out of your way to do something for somebody, like picking me up today, I mean, seriously, because not everybody offers that, right now I can't drive, but see, you fulfill my need.
Yeah, that's good.
You know what I mean? And we, we don't always, but the person that needs it looks at it that way, because 10 people might have walked by, but you're the one that said, you see what I mean? So we really have to water all of those things, so they can take root in us, and really dig, we like the roots go deep,
And I think too is, if you've really been if you really had the born again experience, and you're spending time with the Lord, then these fruits should, I mean, even though we have to cultivate them and be intentional, but, it's like God downloaded himself in us in our born again experience.
Right, you're right.
And so the seed
there.
is there.
The seed
is there.
The seed is there.
But then we have to then grow in those areas.
Right.
So
when I was first saved, I was like 30, and I knew nothing about church. But it was such a blessing because God always provides, and He provided. I was working in a nursing home, so this couple kept coming in all the time. I took care of their mother, and then and they kept saying, "Man, I don't know, she should have been gone a couple, why is she holding on? There's got to be somebody." And I just broke, and I said, and I was always smiling, doing my job and stuff like that, and I said, it's got to be me, but I didn't know anything. So they actually took me under their wing and discipled me.
That's awesome.
And see, that's too, we have to really, if there's people in our congregation, of course we would always ask pastor and get her approval, whatever, but still maybe we should kind of invite them in the house, so like, or whatever, or meet somewhere and kind of cultivate them, really just plant seeds and explain why,
and that's part of that mentorship
and
that growth, and that's why I love why pastor really utilizes you all as shepherding elders to really identify those in the congregation that may desire mentoring or need mentoring, because that is part of that spiritual journey is early on as a new believer, is having someone to kind of take you under their wings. And so that's what I love about, shepherding elders and what you all do. Let's talk about another fruit. We said gentleness. That's a fruit that we should cultivate in our garden.
Well, so gentleness, meekness, I mean, just really not come off, hot-headed, or be gentle, and because a new believer will clam up, so we really have to be gentle, and when we come across things, even with people that are calling us and asking us, or maybe we've called them, maybe they are on our list, and we've called them and they've had a really, rough day, or they can't see light, we do what we can, and we do it in a gentle way, that we don't, make them feel bad, or, because everybody's been in a spot somewhere along the line.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely.
There's no big I's and little U's, and so nobody's more saved than the other person.
Exactly.
we're saved by His grace.
Exactly.
And so, I think our attitude really has to, we just, if they see somebody that says they're saved but are always, just then it's like they'll back off of that. But if they see somebody that will love on them and just kind of give, I love the older people. I say old people, but I'm right there. But it's like I love to see them come in, because I always just kind of squeeze them and give them a kiss on the cheek, and and they're the ones that call me the most. You know what I mean? Because there's a rapport there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's one of those things. It's like you're not going to get anything. My mom always used to say, when you're not going to get anything with something sour, but with something like honey. Yeah. Something sweet. Yeah. That's what they need more than anything. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
so I think gentleness and correction and gentleness. There's a difference between I don't want to say sternness, but you have to be stern. Yeah. But you have to be gentle. Yeah. Is that making sense? Yeah. You can't let them get by with stuff. Yeah. But yet you do it in a gentle way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, the situation that we find ourselves in, like you said, there's a way to, you have to be able to bring correction if you're in a position of leadership or authority. Maybe you're a parent, maybe you're, you're in some sort of position of authority, and correction is needed. And so God will give you the wisdom behind how to handle that situation and correction. But I think, so that's one way of like, okay, how can I handle a situation and yet still get the correction, but yet be gentle in the way that I'm dealing with this person, right? And so that if I'm correcting someone, then yet I'm bringing a covering, but I'm also, because correction is covering, right? It is. So I'm bringing covering correction, but yet in a way that I'm gentle enough so that I don't hurt this person, right? So that's one way in terms of gentleness. But I think also about gentleness in the sense of just the overall way that you carry yourself, the general disposition of your countenance and who you are as a person. And I guess when I think about that, because I've thought about this in the times that I've journaled about this, because like I told you, there were times where I would kind of every day and work on a different thing. I think everybody knows those kind of people that just kind of have a calm, gentle disposition about themselves. And I don't know if I carry that or not, but I think when I think about those types of people, I think in some ways I want to strive to be that, where I can have a sense of or leadership that I'm, but yet I carry a aura of of a gentle. And I think this Bible talks about having a gentle, meek, and mild spirit about yourself, right? And so, and I think gentle people, they tend to have, or if they're operating in a spirit of gentleness, I think that they are the kind of person, they're good listeners, right? They're not always yakking, but they're able to listen.
Right.
I think they're, people that kind of carry that gentle disposition. They have an evenness in their temperament, right? They're not always, they just seem to be I don't know.
Maybe more, they're a comforter with correction, maybe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they're comforting them.
Yeah.
So they don't think they're, the only one or whatever, because you might have been through that too, where, God's tempered you a little, you know what I mean? But I think comfort comes with, correction, but there's a way to do that because you're comforting them, but you're also telling them what's right and wrong.
Right. And Jesus, obviously he operated in a spirit of gentleness, right? And so, gentle people have a way of drawing the crowd because there's, like I said, there's something about the way that they carry themselves that, I think we should all aspire to operate in a spirit of gentleness.
Even, like when everybody was ready to cast the first stone, he started writing their names down, and then they all left basically. And, then he knew she was wrong, but yet he didn't, he comforted her. And then he said, go and sin no more, basically, and everybody else, see, we forget what we done. We're quick, people in general are quick to point out somebody else's, but you might have went through the same thing.
Yeah.
You might be past that now, but what happened to forgiveness?
Yeah.
What happened to, humility? What happened to all these other things like love? You can't let one thing cancel out another. Because then if you do, it's like, well, then that confuses them.
So, cultivating your garden is it's a full-time job. It is a full-time job. It's minding your business.
It's minding your business.
Yeah.
And praying is so important. I mean, because like we know the power of prayer. So we pray over situations that we know are happening. And then God will, take care of that if we're not like say it's in a different state. Maybe it's a grandchild, child, whatever, But God brings them around because God is faithful.
Speaking of, that was one of the
one
of the fruits is faithfulness. Growing faithful, the ability to be faithful in your garden because commitments and people rely on us and commitments and just ability to be just faithful.
Faithful covers a lot.
It covers a lot,
It covers your church attendance. It covers your giving. It covers, forgiveness.
And how you handle yourself in your employee situation.
Because again, we have to be like Christ. And we have to have our lanterns fully lit. And the thing, it's like, that's the thing, we're not doing it to be better. We're doing it because God did it. Jesus did it for us.
And he said, and he wants us to really to cultivate that and understand that to be like him, to be like Christ is to be a person that it can be found faithful.
I mean, he was faithful. Could you imagine at the last minute if he said, well, I'm not going to go get on that cross. But he was faithful to what God did, even unto death. And all the disciples really, except for, was it Peter denying him? But all the others, they died they also died except for one. So it's like, we have to be faithful. We don't know what's ahead of us, but God has prepared us and is continuing to prepare us daily for what we face. Time we're there, we will be ready.
When I think about faithfulness, I'm thinking about just a generation that's on the planet right now. Pastor talks a lot about it. We have a generation or culturally of people that are just not faithful. It's not important. It's not an important attribute anymore. And no one is faithful, like you said, in church attendance, on their jobs, faithful to their spouses, faithful to no one's it's something that has lost. And I think this is again why this conversation is so important about what we should be growing in our garden, what God says that we should be growing. This is not just like a great idea, like this is out of the Bible. Like these are the things that we should be growing out of our Bible, growing in our garden. These are the foundational things that God knew that in order to have to walk a life with him, and not only that, just to reap the harvest, to have a thriving world, and we're lacking these simple these fruits are not growing in our society, right? Like in the garden of society, we're lacking love, we're lacking humility, we're lacking faithfulness, we're lacking self-control, and this is why the world is going crazy, because these attributes of Jesus, these fruit that we should be growing in the garden, people aren't being intentional about the importance
or even taught. And if their parents don't teach them, and I sit back and I think with my kids, it's like, I wasn't brought up in that, so how would I know to bring my kids up like that? But like when Pastor Tony was talking about being on the bus, the church bus, you know, and how they wanted to go. Well, kind of that's what happened to us.
Yeah.
You know, I was divorced at the time, but, you know, I had my kids and they wanted to go because their friends were going.
Yeah.
And so I let them go, you know, and they still to this day can tell me, Mom, I really learned a lot.
Yeah.
Plus, in my generation, we didn't give our children everything they wanted. And we wore hand-me-downs.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no such thing as a designer thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was one of those things where, at least in my family, you know, that I wore my brother's overalls. You know what I mean? And it just kept, as long as it was good, you know, it still could be worn.
Yeah.
You know, it was just because that was never an issue.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's where we have created in our society that you have to have designer this, you have to have, you know, all of that kind of stuff. This is more important. You have to have the best this. And then they think that they don't realize what their parents went through, you know, for them.
Yeah.
And I think we all worked as we got older.
Yeah.
We all had to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The kids don't even have a job nowadays.
Yeah.
But it's too much has been given and not enough earned. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that, and I think that, you know, we're seeking for everything else except for
God.
For God. You know, we're trying to find joy in things, peace in things, love in things. We're trying to find, you know, all of these different things in other things.
Right.
And not in Christ. And and because of that, I think, you know, we're looking outward when we should be looking inward.
Right. And see, that's where really we come in. You know, as you know, these little girls used to live next to me, and one of them knocked on my door the other day, and she's grown, you know. And I said, "Were you the one that lived next door?" And she said, "Yeah." You know, and so I had a conversation with her and stuff like that, and told her, I said, "Man, I didn't even recognize you," you know. And it was just that nice little touch, you know. But I think, not that we have to earn for our salvation, work for our salvation, because we don't.
Exactly.
You know, but we are expected to do the things that we're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, God gave his son for us to do that, you know, that we could spread the gospel, you know.
Well, he's not going to let us be late. Like he's not going to let us be lazy.
No.
You know, that is not even part of his nature. You know, and so, you know, he birthed us into a new kingdom.
Right.
But, you know, because we're in the world, you know, there's suffering, there is the warfare of two kingdoms happening.
Oh yeah.
Right. You know, the spirit of the kingdom of God and the kingdom of Satan.
Exactly.
You know, and so these two things war against, and because we're in a spirit, our spirits are in a body, and we're in the world, there will, you know, the Bible tells us there will be trouble, right?
Yes, right.
And so because of that, we're always having to push back, you know, a worldly system, a worldly way of thinking, and the way that we are able to stand and fight the good fight of faith is by tending to our garden and doing the work to cultivate. Otherwise, we will be swept up into a world system that is not of Christ.
I know. I think it's still so important.
And that's unfortunate, but that is the reality.
It is.
And that if we're not cultivating, we're going to we will be swept into a
and I
system.
think it's important too that we remember. I've been hearing for months that we have to armor up because we're not fighting flesh and blood.
Right.
You know, and so, you know, I don't know. We do have to put our armor on every day. You know, we really do. And when we don't, you know, that's when we, like you said, you do it every day. You know, you picked one thing and you did it every day, and that grew in you.
You know, that area, and that's why, you know, it's important to not forget about these. And that's why we said, you know, this week was all about what should you be growing in your garden.
Yes.
And so we said we need to be growing love in our garden. We need to grow forgiveness, humility, Gentleness. We talked about faithfulness. And then let's just kind of, quickly talk about, the last four. Self-control is a big one. Having self-control. And I think all of us can look at our lives and identify areas where we're out of control. Where that thing is controlling us, and we're not controlling it.
Right.
And so, and that's not, it is what it is. It's no condemnation.
No.
It's just that, at all. It's just that this is the work of the believer. That we look at our lives and say, okay, this area is a little bit out of control, or the Holy Spirit always. He's a good teacher. And, so he'll show you, let's just work on this area here, whether it be finances, whether it's food, whether it's just whatever area that we haven't put under the subject of Christ.
Right.
And, so growing the fruit of self-control, in your garden, the ability to control yourself and for your spirit to lead.
Yes.
To put that spirit out front so that your spirit is leading in those areas.
Yeah, I think we definitely, have to be led by the Spirit, because when our nature takes over, it will always throw us in because the Spirit is strong, and we have to humble ourselves and let the Spirit lead us. And I think we've all in areas fallen short of that.
When I think about the fruit of the Spirit, and we'll probably talk about this, I may bring it up again when we talk about weeds, but I always think about, the reason why I want to cultivate the fruit of the Spirit, or these things that we're talking about, is because if I'm not cultivating these things intentionally, then 9 times out of 10, I'm walking in the opposite of that fruit.
That's good.
So if I'm not cultivating faithfulness, then I'm probably walking in unfaithfulness in some areas of my life. This is by default. So it's like you could choose to cultivate it or not, but if you're not choosing by default, you might find yourself. So if I'm not cultivating self-control, then I'm probably some area out of control.
Right.
If I'm not cultivating love somewhere, I'm probably walking in some selfishness.
Yeah.
If I'm not cultivating forgiveness, then I'm probably finding myself in unforgiveness.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like by default, the sin nature, our body wants our flesh wants to always pull us into, that sin nature.
Yes. Oh yeah.
But, so we do have to be intentional about
we definitely do,
about growing the fruits.
Yeah.
Joy, peace, and patience. What do you want to?
Well, I think that we can have peace. When we perfect peace.
Yeah, that perfect peace.
Yeah, and I know with everything I went through this year, it seems like I have found peace and growth, because I know that God has got me.
Yeah.
And I think it's what we know.
It's what we know.
It's what we know.
And that brings peace.
Yeah, and that brings peace. Exactly.
And it brings joy too.
It does bring joy.
Because when you know that God's got you, then it's a joy that comes from the inside. You're not searching for external things to feel that. You just know that because your trust and confidence is in Him.
Right. And as far as patience, like I can sit on something for a while until I know, like this whole thing, I think it's probably been almost a year since I said something to Apostle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And before that, it was kind of working on me a little bit, because I was like, I think I'm ready to start, because I had this thing working in me. But I'm patient to let God have His timing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Good.
Because God's timing is everything. If we step out before God's timing, then it doesn't always work out right.
And that one is a big one, I think, sometimes for me, because I'm a planner. I can see, things, or and I think sometimes, not when you're not cultivating the fruit of patience in the ground of your heart, then you can run out in front of God.
Right.
And so that is an area that I constantly have to remind myself is that, or cultivate, is that fruit of patience, so that maybe it's because I'm a doer. I like to get things done.
I am like that too, though.
And
I really
then
am.
it's like, okay, yeah, but just because God showed it to you doesn't mean that the timing, right? So sometimes it's like learning how to take what God is showing me and then put it in the crucible of patience, and then let God show me, okay, now it's time for this, or now it's time for that.
Right, because patience has its perfect work.
Yeah.
And I think through the years I've really learned that. I'm very proactive, so I understand where you're coming from. But I also know if something doesn't work out like this, it's like, okay, well, I have patience, do what I need to do. I will still read the word every day. I will still do this. And do my share. And then when it's God's timing, it will happen.
Yeah.
You don't have to force it to happen.
Yeah, I love that. You don't have to force anything.
Because when you force it, it's never, it flows smooth when it's God's timing.
Yeah, when it's His timing. So I love that. Well, I think this was a great, great week to talk about this. I think we have one more week left.
I know.
One more week left. I hope that you all will join us. But if you were wondering about, hey, what should I be growing in my garden, since we're talking about the garden, you should be growing these attributes of Jesus. One of the things that we want to leave you with is that the condition of your heart will lead you, and it will lead you in the way that you're going to go.
Good or bad.
Good or bad.
Yep.
That's the key. So, the word says that out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks.
Yep.
And so your heart is a GPS navigation system, obviously. And if your heart, if you're filling it with godly attributes, if you're letting the Holy Spirit lead and guide you, then we know that your garden is going to lead you in the best possible, in the best direction, in the direction that God has for you.
And I think this is right on time. Yeah. I really feel that. It really is. It's right on time.
Yeah. Being intentional, just like a gardener would sit down and think about, okay, I have a field of land. What should I grow in this garden? Am I growing wheat? Am I growing soybeans? Am I growing corn? What am I going to grow in this garden?
Right.
And so as we're thinking about the garden of our heart and what God wants us to be growing, wants us to grow in our garden, then He's given us a really clear picture of that in the scripture where He talks about the fruit of the Spirit.
Yep, I agree.
And so love, forgiveness, humility, gentleness, self-control, faithfulness, joy, peace, and patience. All right. Well, hey, let's get busy working on the ground up our hearts, you guys. We'll see you next week. Make sure that, sow a seed into this good ground. This is good ground, Raise Encounters. Every time you come for a service or you listen online, you're always getting fed the word of God. And it's the Rhema word. It's that word that's going to keep you grounded, keep you strong. That's what Pastor always says. She said, I'm not going to be long, but I'm going to keep you strong. Yeah. The word that comes out of Raise Encounters is going to keep you strong. Yeah. And so make sure you sow a seed. All the giving information is on the screen. Take advantage of that today, and we'll see you next week. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Bye now.